Good afternoon and welcome to our third panel today as part of the Land of Hope and Dreams celebration of Dave Marsh's work and vision. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm one of the conference organizers, and I cannot wait to listen to the next 90 minutes of folks talking about Dave Marsh and Detroit and beyond. This event's been a year and a half in the making, and we are thrilled to see it come to fruition. We've really tried to cover all aspects of Dave's work and vision. His work in music, politics, social justice, and healthcare. And if you look at our list of panelists today and throughout the conference, I hope we've done a good job of honoring that work and vision. Before we move on to discussion, I just have a few thank you notes. I'd like to thank all of the members of the organizing committee who put this together. I'd like to thank the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the University of Wisconsin-Madison Afro-American Studies Department who are helping us promote this. And the Rock Hall will also be playing the conversation between Daniel Wolf and Dave Marsh on their YouTube channel on May 14th. We're also streaming all of these sessions directly to YouTube, and they will be archived on YouTube as well. One last note, we are so happy to be able to have done this as a purely volunteer effort and provide it all for free at no charge. But if you've a mind to throw a few dollars someone's direction, in honor of Dave Marsh, there's not a better place to do that than the Kristen Ann Carr Fund, which is the foundation he and his wife, Barbara Carr, set up 20-some years ago to honor their late daughter, Kristen, and raise money for sarcoma research and fellows helping to treat sarcoma across the country. So let's move on to talking about Detroit. And before we do that, I want to play a video from Chris Buhalis, who is a Detroit area musician who's got a few things to say about Dave Marsh and the Detroit area.
Hi, I'm Chris Buhalis in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm happy to be here for the Dave Marsh celebration. Dave's work has been very important to me and my work as a songwriter and as a human. I grew up in Detroit, and when I was 17 years old, I went into the public library of the suburb where I lived, and I got this book. The introduction to Fortunate Son, Dave's collected works, introduced me to Dave's writing. I hadn't really read Cream magazine, not Dave's articles anyway. I was a little young. And the characters that Dave described, the people that he talked about so lovingly and honestly, I realized very early on in the introduction that they were the same people that I knew. Dave's people were my people. And the way he identified things that troubled me about where I lived, the endemic racism and how I related to the world through where I'm from, were really changed by reading that book. And I can't stress enough just how much reading that there was somebody else out there who thought some of the things that I was feeling when I was at a very, very vulnerable age. You know, I'm so thankful that I read that, and that our mutual love of Smokey Robinson, not just Bruce Springsteen, will always bind us together. So Dave, I'm proud to know you, and thanks for writing things that really helped me to be proud of where I'm from. And I come from a big car town. We shine 'em up and drive 'em all around. Believer goes out, comes back around, and that Jesus saves. Gordie Howe puts in the rebound.
Dave Marsh is from Pontiac, Michigan. He tells you this in the first line of the introduction to the book that Chris Buhalis just mentioned, Fortunate Son, and it usually comes up pretty quickly if you have a conversation with Dave about his roots. Pontiac is his childhood home, but I think he also mentions it as a gesture of respect to his spiritual home of Detroit and the people who live in and built the city. Detroit is a place near and dear to Dave's heart, central to his professional, his political, and his musical life. In Fortunate Son, Dave actually writes that he was chastised by his wife for being so obsessed with his origins in Michigan that he spoke of the place as if it existed on another planet. We've all treated Detroit that way, much to the annoyance of many Detroiters, including 3 generations of my own family who have lived there. The city has become the source of countless metaphors about the state of America and anything else that people can come up with. Some of those metaphors are useful, most of them are not. But there's a reason why those metaphors exist in the first place. And it's because we all have a stake in Detroit. Its economics, its politics, its culture, and its music have shaped the way that we have all lived as Americans and have shaped the way that people live around the world. We would be a different and lesser place without Detroit. Dave has been one of the people who has taught us that. And so, in their own way, have the four remarkable individuals on our panel today who have each shaped the history of Detroit and the way that we think about it. My name is Alexander Shoshko. I teach in the Department of Afro-American Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And on behalf of the entire committee, I hope you enjoy the panel today. Your turn, Peter.
Okay. Here I am, I hope. Someone tell me if they can hear me and see me. I don't see my camera on.
We're hearing you, but we're not seeing you.
Okay, there you go.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here, and just even looking at this very typical picture of Dave on our screen, leading on all those amazing books that he's written, and a true treasure for
Marsh?
What?
Is that Dave Marsh in that picture?
Hey, sit back, turn your mic off, and I will go on. Anyway, Dave first walked into the Fifth Estate office. Fifth Estate was one of the original underground newspapers. And in 1969, he said, I got a story on these big riots that just happened in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I wonder if you'd like to print it. We read it, we said, sure. And we put it on the front page along with photographs from John's wife, Lenny Sinclair. He also did an article for the Fifth Estate a few months later on one of John's marijuana trials. Just recently. Ex-wife, thank you. Last Tuesday, Dave was a guest on Fifth Estate Live, a streamcast we do every Tuesday, and it only hosts as guests people whose work has appeared in the Fifth Estate. And although it's been 52 years since Dave had written anything, we thought he still qualified. So a lot to cover here about Detroit. See, what's real. I mean, lots of it. In 1976, Bob Seger took the stage down at Cobo Hall, this massive arena where he recorded Live Bullet. And one of the iconic phrases that is remembered there, he said, Detroit, the home of rock and roll. That's an interesting quote if we begin to unpack it and who and what it means to who. I think that probably most rock fans, yeah, because rock and roll, as we know, was invented by Bob Seger and Mitch Ryder and the MC. Wait a minute. It goes back a little farther than that, doesn't it? And I think our panelists certainly all know that. And I think that's what we're going to talk about. And a person who's well situated to begin our conversation is Marsha Music. She's a writer and poet. She calls herself a Detroitist. I love the phrase. And she writes acclaimed essays. She does great poetry, narrative, and where it is really key for our discussion, she's the daughter of a pre-Motown record producer called Joe Von Battle. And she was a student activist, and she was one of the founders of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, particularly at the Dodge plant. So the union there was called the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement. She became a labor activist. She was a union president, and she's self-taught, an independent scholar. She speaks frequently. She's contributed to anthologies, to oral history. She's been on HBO, Amazon Prime, and she received the very prestigious Kresge Literary Arts Fellowship in 2012, a Knight Arts Challenge Award in 2015. She's performed her poetry and one-woman shows in many Detroit stages, including the Detroit Symphony and Michigan Opera House. And plus, she's a good friend of mine, and she's a good friend of Dave Marsh. Marsha Music.
Well, hello. Thank you. It's wonderful to be in the company of these esteemed gentlemen of Detroit music. All of you, it's wonderful. I am so honored to be in your presence. Uh, I, uh, I feel this is some rock and roll hallowed ground we're here discussing and being in the midst of. Um, well, let me start out by talking a little bit about Detroit music to begin with. Detroit had emerged after the beginning of the last century, kind of embedded in the big band sound, and over the years, that sound began to particularize itself to Detroit and began to morph into jazz, and at the same time, a fork in the road with blues. And so the blues was also um, augmented here by the migration of people from the South. And the people that came from the South brought their music with them. The Blacks who were escaping Jim Crow and plantation life and literally running here from their lives in order to work in the factories here were coming here, bringing music with them and changing the entire tenor of the music here in Detroit. Uh, During that time of transition and the development of blues here, my father in 1945, just after World War II, opened up a record store on Old Hastings Street. And on Hastings Street, there was all manner of musical outlets, record stores, wholesale record stores, bars, clubs, all kinds of musicality was a part of the Hastings, which was teeming with people all the time, and pretty amazing place back in the old days. And my dad opened up this record store in 1945. And soon thereafter, he began to record uh, people from around the neighborhood who came in. But it just so happened that the people in this neighborhood happened to be John Lee Hooker and people that we know today, such as Della Reese, who was one of the meditation singers. And people like that came to the record shop on Hastings Street, and they stayed there. They were there every day, and they were there all the time. And so John Lee Hooker was my dad's friend, and one of the most iconic photographs of John Lee Hooker and little Sonny, also known as his real name, Aaron Willis, standing outside the record shop on Hastings Street. John Lee Hooker with his white shirt on and his natty pants and his guitars was taken in 1959 in front of Dad's shop. And so Old Hastings Street was bubbling with music and with sound. So at the same time that you had this jazz, because Hastings Street was really a jazz street, my dad was something of a throwback because of his insistence upon selling blues. Now, he sold everything. He had selections from the opera singer Mario Lanza. He had Marian Anderson. He had Frank Sinatra. He had all kinds of people, but he wanted to sell the blues because that's what the people that were still coming from the South were listening to. And so that period lasted until Hastings Street was destroyed by the development of the I-75 freeway and quote unquote urban renewal that was known even then as Negro removal. For the phenomenon of having moved Black business owners and the Jewish and other immigrant business owners off of Hastings Street. And many of them then moved to the 12th Street community. They moved to the 12th Street community, which was was turning over. And they began to crowd these people into that community. And so it was a merely short 7 years later that in 1967, the social upheaval burst forth. And one of the underlying issues that caused such a conflagration was the destruction of Hastings Street and Black Bottom, which is a factor that is very rarely discussed in our public talks about Black Bottom and Hastings Street. It was such a short period of time that the people had been moved out of Hastings and were still really raging about having moved out of their businesses and homes. So 1967 was a pivotal point because what it also represented was the development of real opposition type of activism that took place. The Black struggle took a real turn toward more independent actions rather than reliance upon the traditional NAACP and other groups like that. And one of the manifestations of this in 1968 was the creation of Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement. And this was a movement of Black workers in the factory in Hamtramck, Dodge, Maine. And they were headed in that particular factory by General Baker and Chuck Wooten and Ron Marsh. And these were the workers that had worked at Dodge, Maine. And also, they were also in collaboration with a number of real major dynamic players, and Mike Hamlin and Kenneth Cockrell Sr. and other people who were dynamic leaders during that period of time, Marion Kramer, Imara Hyman. These are people who were real leaders in the city at that time. Now, how do I come to be mixed up in all of that? Well, my father, from 1960, when the Hastings Street move had to take place, you know, when he was compelled to move, his very social and fun drinking in the back of the record shop took a significant turn toward alcoholism. And I believe that he was despairing and at this enforced move. And he significantly turned to alcoholism. And so my young life became marked by growing up in the sort of mayhem of alcoholism and my father's illness because of alcoholism and the social pressures that he was experiencing. But in 1967, his record store was ultimately destroyed in the upheaval. Although I will say that his record shop was not destroyed by looters, it was actually destroyed by the authorities after the week-long upheaval took place. And so, but so much of his recordings, blues recordings, my father was a obsessive recorder of everything that he heard around him. And so he, in his early days recording, was the first person ever to record the voice of Aretha Franklin. And he recorded her first records that were gospel records. Her very first gospel records were on his labels. And that took place because he was the producer of the Reverend C.L. Franklin. And he produced Reverend C.L. Franklin for over a decade. Every single recording of the C.L. Franklin was recorded by my father, no matter what label it was on. My father had some amazing contacts, and he was in a collaborative relationship with Phil and Leonard Chess in Chicago. And because he actually preceded them when he opened up. And he had very convivial relationships with them, and they became distributors of many of the things that he recorded here in Detroit. So back to 1967, 68, the social turmoil in Detroit is indescribable today. Peter Werby has written a book to try to describe it, and he's one of the few that has really tried to capture the social underpinnings of the rebellion of the time and the atmosphere in Detroit of social upheaval of the Black Power movement, the labor movement of Black workers in the plants, the women's movement, women's liberation, and the anti-war movement, which sort of was the underpinning of much of it. And so in this atmosphere, and in the atmosphere of my own father's weakening and insanity due to alcoholism, I sort of drifted out of the confines of home and began to find myself around these brothers in drum. And I was a young teen, and we were young teenagers in the schools all over Detroit. And we began to hang out in the offices of the drum offices and the newly found League of Revolutionary Black Workers, of which I'm honored to have been one of the founders, one of the youngest as a teenager. And in this atmosphere over in the office, I remember reading these papers that talked about the MC5. And so here we were in our world of Black activism. And in the plants, you know, we would get up in the morning before we went to school, we students, and we would go to the plant and pass out literature for the brothers at the plant, because they would get fired and they couldn't touch us because we were students. And so I grew up in this type of atmosphere, hanging out with the General Baker and Chuck Wooten and over at the office, and they would have all of these newspapers. And it would be newspapers from all over, and it would be the Fifth Estate and all of these different papers. And they would talk about the White Panthers, and it would be like, what? The White Panthers? And so all of the brothers and those of us who are involved on a daily basis, we looked at this activity of these white brothers and sisters going on with a certain kind of bemusement, but also we were very clear that they were allies in this struggle. We understood that they were allies. And so we were now in this big cauldron of activity that was not just Blacks, but whites as well. And this bombastic music coming out of the MC5 that was just crazy. It was just mind-blowing. And so you got, on the one hand, you have Motown is smooth. You got John Lee Hooker going on. You have all kinds of music going on in Detroit. You have Mitch Ryder, you know, he's doing this thing. And then you have way over here, you have the MC5, and they are all the way out there. And so this is the atmosphere in which I grew up. So over time, I became, in my 20s, a sort of bona fide rock chick, in that my partner at the time was an on-air personality at WABX. And so my whole life in the 20s was spent around WABX and in the music of that time and FM album rock. And kids today probably don't even have a clue about the unbelievable revolutionary quality of music on FM radio. FM radio was one of the most extraordinary phenomenon in the city. And CKLW played the popular hits in the daytime. And one of the significant things about CKLW is that its signal was so strong over there coming from Windsor. My father had a radio program. He leased space when he was living. He leased space from CKLW. And he played the records of the Reverend C.L. Franklin at night on Sunday nights. And Franklin had his own show. So my dad's show would come on at one time and then Franklin's would come on later. And they would all play this gospel in C.L. Franklin's. But because CKLW, my dad leased space from them, and he had this radio show on CKLW, the music was beamed all over, all the way down into the South. So this is one of the reasons why C.L. Franklin became so famous in the Black community, because his music and the music of Aretha was heard down in Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, all these southern places that were hearing this unidirectional signal from CKLW. As I wrap up, let me say this. So I spent those years in the rock world, and over time, I went on to other pursuits, such as working every day and having a career. I became a labor union president at the age of 28, and I was the first Black, the youngest, and the first woman president of my local union. And I was a union president for some years, and then shifted into another career and worked in the courts. And I just retired from there after 30 years. So I've had quite a life. And in all of this, I was always a writer. And my partner at the time, in my mid 20s, introduced me to Dave Marsh, his old friend. And I remember going to New York to visit Dave Marsh with my partner. And it was a place that had more books in one room belonging to one person that I had ever seen. And Dave began to encourage me to write, because he had been told by my partner, you know, this woman can write. And he believed him, and I began to correspond with Dave. And after a while, I began to make some contributions to his Rock and Rap Confidential newsletter. And the thing about Dave, and I have always referred to him as a mentor of my writing, because he was one of the seminal people who understood the significance of my father. He understood the significance of my upbringing. He understood the role of Detroit. And I believe that in Dave's own persona, his extreme rigor, his extraordinary production of work, his very prolific production of works is a part of that kind of proletarian intellectualism that he exemplified, that absolute razor sharp proletarian rigor. And I always have been an admirer of him. He and I have had some knockdown battles, knockdown polemics, but we're both still standing. And I love him. And he is one of the people who set my path on writing the way that he did, and encouraging me and say, girl, you can write and you better write. And so I think that pretty much wraps it up. I honed my chops writing in a email group that we had, writing with him and other members that are part of this conference. And today I have a lot of things out there. I have a book called The Detroitist, a small pocket book of some of my writings about Detroit. And I am currently working on a book about my father, and also a film project, which I have received funding from the Knight Foundation for a film project about my father called Hastings Street Blues. And I just wanted to acknowledge the role of Dave Marsh in my life. And what he taught me in a nutshell, as a writer, he taught me that the ability to say exactly what it is you want to say, period, because that's what he does. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Music, and yeah, you do that as well. In my novel, Summer on Fire, I expand on the destruction of Joe's record shop and compare it to the destruction of the library at Alexandrine. I mean, it wasn't just a few random records. It was tapes that were irreplaceable of the greats of Detroit music. Incredible loss. We're continuing with our celebration of Dave Marsh. Another friend of mine and a friend of Dave's is Wayne Kramer. Wayne and four friends from the Detroit suburbs, these working class suburbs. Suburbs usually meant fancy places, not where these guys lived, for sure. They formed the MC5 in 1964, and he's done a lot since then. Although there was a 50th anniversary of Kick Out the Jams, their signal song for sure. And most recently, he did songwriting and playing on Alice Cooper's new album, Detroit Stories. Although Alice, his connection with Detroit's a little tenuous. Wayne's certainly isn't. He's had an incredible life of music, also of travail. His memoir is a must reading, absolutely. It's called The Hard Stuff, Dope, Crime, and the MC5, and My Life of Impossibilities. And he took things in his life and made positive steps that are encouraging to anybody in music or in life as well. And I wonder, Wayne, whether you could talk, if you think it's a valuable way to continue, about what I said about Bob Seger saying Detroit was the home of rock and roll and what that meant. I mean, that was said in 1976. You guys were rocking and rolling in 1964. What were the origins there, and what did you see as Detroit's home of rock and roll?
Well, thanks. Let me just say at the onset, I'm honored to be with such esteemed company, and really appreciated Marsh's remarks. And to just kind of pick up from there, this idea of Detroit being the, rock city, and the great pride that many of us take in our Detroit connection, our roots in that city. And that I've come to learn, I didn't know it in the 50s and the 60s growing up in Detroit, but I know today that what we tap into is a very, very long, healthy tradition in Detroit of really quality music by quality musicians and quality music educators. There was a great book called Before Motown by Lars Bourne and Jim Gallert. That's the history of jazz in Detroit. And I discovered that, at the turn of the century, before there was radio and before there was television, people went out dancing 7 nights a week. And places that the MC5 played, like the Grandy Ballroom or the Easttown Ballroom, were part of a large circuit of these beautiful structures, these dance halls. And the touring bands would come and play, and people would go to dance every night. It was like what you did. And, it was a healthy economy for musicians. The big bands were viable. People paid, a couple pennies in those days. But that was the scale of the economy. To come and hear these great musicians and great arrangers and great big bands, and dance, and even when the bands needed new musicians, the band leaders would come to Detroit to find new players, because the music programs, I think, at Northwestern and Northeastern high schools were so highly developed and proficient that the kids came out of those programs were better than the other musicians around the country. So the band leaders would come to Detroit to get the best new players. And as Marcia mentioned, this evolved, with the coming of radio and television. Of course, the ballroom business collapsed, and people stayed home and listened to their radios, but the club scene emerged, and the birth of bebop and the small groups was thriving in Detroit. And I mean, I grew up at a time when there were hundreds and hundreds of clubs all over the city, 7 nights a week. You could hear live music. And the auto industry, which is the economic engine of Detroit, or was in the 50s and 60s, people, they work swing shifts, days, afternoons, and midnights. And guys would get out of work. These were good paying jobs in those days. Single young guys, they want to go out to a club and hear a band and meet a girl and get loaded. And it was an exciting time. And so really that kind of pride about Detroit is really part of a longer, larger tradition, because the cultural forces in Detroit were unique. Like Marcia mentioned, people came up from the South for the good union auto jobs, and they brought their culture with them. And Detroit radio was incredible. It was Detroit radio where I listened as a boy to C.L. Franklin, and I probably listened to your father, not knowing who I was listening to, but just experiencing what was happening in the Black church. It was so powerful to me, the connection between what the preacher was saying, the spirit of what he was saying, and his audience. The call and response and the musicality of it was so compelling that was really a huge influence on the way I engineered the MC5's performance. I wanted us to try to capture some of that, the power and that connection.
Right. That Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah. That crescendo. Captured that. Yeah.
We talked about it. It was, it was a conscious effort. We worked on that to try to engage people, and I think that's one of the things that set the MC5 apart from our contemporaries. If I stood up on the stage and put my fist in the air or put the peace sign up, and kids in the audience did the same thing back to me, that was a powerful connection, because we were addressing their concerns directly, straight on. We weren't beating around the bush about it. We weren't adding our politics in on the side. This was front and center. The things we cared about were the same things they cared about. So the cultural landscape in Detroit is completely unique. I grew up around, I was born at Lincoln Hospital just off of West Grand Boulevard. And my first memories were of all different kinds of kids. There were black kids lived next door. There were Mexican kids. That was just normal to me. I didn't really snap to the idea that America was so segregated until I was, grown and touring in a rock band to see that, in most cities in America, all the white people lived over there, and all the black people lived over here, and all the brown people lived over there. And it just wasn't my experience growing up in Detroit. I mean, my mother had opened the first interracial beauty salon, so ladies could all get their hair done together in the same salon. It was just a normal way to live, and the music was, it may sound arrogant of me, but C.L. Franklin's church service, John Lee Hooker's music, James Brown's music, Marvin Gaye's music, that was all my music too. That came out of my experience. And then later, through the challenges of the late 60s and as the political oppression grew, and we became more militant in our stance, our anti-establishment stance. The White Panthers were a way for us to express our frustration with the slow pace of change. This shit was moving too slow, and like young people have always, we want it now. My problem with instant gratification is it takes too long. So, so we had the band, and we joined forces with John Sinclair, and we start to make some progress. We're moving forward, and this magazine emerged, Cream magazine, and this writer Dave Marsh, and you know I thought the magazine was terrific, and I thought they reflected the attitude that we had as a band, and that I think we had as a community. That the rest of the country and the rest of the world kind of looked down their nose at us in Detroit, like nothing substantial could come out of a factory town. They make Chevrolets in Detroit. They don't make art and culture and music. But I knew that was bullshit, that great musicians were from Detroit, and we had this history of music, and that our ideas, the things that we trafficked in, our poetry, our music, our aspirations, were more stretched out than anything I was hearing from San Francisco or Los Angeles or London. I mean, I liked what they were all doing, but they weren't doing what we were doing, and they weren't saying what we were saying. So, Cream magazine kind of brought that sense to the larger world, and of course, Dave Marsh was one of the intellectual pillars at Cream. I mean, it was his, and I so liked Marsha, the way you described his accuracy. His kind of laser focus on what he wanted to say. And listen, I've been on the receiving end of that too. He's been critical of things that I did in the MC5 that really gave me, pause to rethink and consider his arguments, and oftentimes end up agreeing with him, that his analysis was probably more accurate than mine. I've learned a lot from Dave over the years, just, being friends. And then, we all go through the challenges life throws at us, and to get to go through these things with a guy like that, and share, he's been rock solid over the years. And I think it's terrific. We get a chance to use him as an excuse to get together and talk about all this stuff, because you're right, it doesn't get talked about enough. What happened in Detroit, and what continues to happen in Detroit, deserves more attention. So I think that's enough out of me.
Ooh, that was beautiful. That was
Thank you, Wayne
beautiful.
Kramer. We will be able to take questions, and we do so. If I would have been smart, I would have written down how. But there is a chat here that I see we're already beginning to get some questions, which we can get to. Although I would like to ask Wayne this before we introduce John. This is from Phyllis Pollock. She says, Dave encouraged me to get over 500 FBI files on people in the music business declassified. One of them was Wayne's, that she got to you, she says. Thanks to an article I co-wrote with Dave, the Fed started an FBI file on me. The question for Wayne is, are you aware of the effect that the MC5 Detroit activists were having on people like me that lived in other states? I mean, we know the effect you had in Southeast Michigan, but you're a national phenomenon as well. Wayne?
Well, I am today, because I'm in communication with people, and people write me emails, and the coming of the digital age has allowed us all to connect easier. Back then, I think we saw our job as messengers, to carry a message of defiance and of wisdom, that the way they were running the country was wrong and the corruption was unbearable. And
Opposition.
somebody needed to say something about it, and somebody needed to do something about it. And I was fortunate enough to fall in with John Sinclair, who really helped me expand my thinking beyond just playing music in a band, but to the larger historical and political significance of what an artist can bring to the table. John influenced the MC5 in a tremendously positive way, and I think that at the time, I mean, we saw the White Panther Party as a way to help organize young people, especially young rock fans. They might come to the table looking for the rock, but we also had some other ideas to share with them, some ideas about how music could be different, how politics could be different, how culture could be different, how the way you work or the food you eat, or, you take care of the planet. Everything was subject to change. And I think we were shooting out into the void of the youth of America. We were going to try to get them to see the light, that there was a better way to go about doing what we're doing. And if we were organized, if we had some unity, we could make a difference.
Thank you, Wayne. Yeah, we're starting to get some questions now, and we'll address some of them a little later. Introducing John Sinclair could take almost the rest of the time we have available. Such has been his career over 60 years or more. He's known as a poet, but perhaps maybe the best description is a cultural worker. He has done so much on so many different platforms and levels. He founded in the early 1960s the Detroit Artists Workshop. Of course, he managed the MC5. He was one of the co-founders of the White Panther Party, produced the absolutely incredible Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival. When you look at the lineup for the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival, you say, no, this couldn't be. These people couldn't all be on the same bill on the same day. He directed the Detroit Jazz Center. He's taught blues history. He's edited the City Arts Quarterly, on and on and on. He too, like Wayne, spent time in prison, coming into the gun sights of the authorities, and paid that price for it, but came out even stronger. A dear friend, and someone I've known for almost as long as he's been active, John Sinclair.
Hey, Peter.
Hey.
I've known you a long time.
Yeah, man.
You and that guy, Frank Joyce.
Another good friend of Dave Marsh's, yeah.
What I was going to say, Marsh, the closest contact I had, I didn't really know your dad. I was a fan and follower of his. In 1973 at the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival, I had the opportunity as a co-producer. I got to pick all the artists for the festival and tell them what time, when they should go on. I wanted to do this thing. I wanted to get all the Detroit blues artists that were still alive together on one show and present them at our festival on one afternoon. Detroit Blues. Well, to me, the most obscure of all Detroit bluesmen and my favorite was a guy called One String Sam.
Yeah.
One String Sam made a record of '78 called I Need $100 on the Joe Von Bottles Battle record label. No, JVV they called it.
Yeah.
And somehow, I came across this because it was on an anthology called Detroit Blues from West Coast. Blues reissue label. And man, I thought this was the greatest, but how would you ever find this guy? Because this was 1974, 73, and the record came out in 56. And one night I'm sitting with a friend of mine named Tom Allen and his wife Joyce, smoking some joints. And they asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm putting this thing together for the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival. And it's all blues artists of Detroit. And I'm looking for this guy called One String Sam. And Tom's wife, Joyce, says, well, you know, my dad has a building in Inkster. And there's a guy they call One String, and he's the manager of this building, lives in the basement. And it was him. And I brought him out of there, and we gave him a couple $100 and convinced him to play at this festival. And he was the star of the whole 3 days. He was bigger than Ray Charles. They loved One String Sam. He played all over his grounds.
Wow.
That was your dad's discovery, one of the many.
John, let me just say that one of the things about One String Sam that my older brother, Joe Von Battle Jr., who is still living and is in his mid-80s, my older brother, he worked side by side with my dad in the record shop all the early years. He told me that One String Sam would walk up and down Hastings Street with not only his long broomstick with a one string on it, but he would carry by his side a wash bin, a metal wash bin. And because in those days, you know, you would have a wash bin in your basement, you know, a metal wash bin for hand washing.
Yeah, they'd use it for bass players.
And he would use that for the bass resonance.
Yeah.
And he would come in and he would set his thing in this wash bin and play. And so that's what made me think of that.
Yeah, it was cool. And after that, we got him my partner was a guy named Peter Andrews. We had a booking agency and management. And we booked One String Sam on quite a few gigs in Michigan at colleges, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan. That was a big thrill for me. That was all because of Joe Von Battle.
I remember him backstage at the Blues Festival. He had a glass and he was walking around singing, all I need $100.
Used it as a microphone.
Yeah.
Echo chamber.
Wow.
He was brilliant.
Wow.
He was great.
Wow. That is so cool. That is so cool.
I was a blues lover since I was about 11 or 12 years old. I grew up listening to blues records and rhythm and blues records all through high school. I became a teenage disc jockey. I used to collect 45s. I didn't have any money, so I stole them all. I could steal any 45 that wasn't nailed down or behind the counter.
Wow.
Thousands of them. And I was a DJ at record dances after school, Friday night, Saturday night. That's how I got into disc jockey. And my life's ambition was to be a disc jockey.
It's not what it's cracked up to be.
I have my own record, my own radio program station. I got my own radio station on the internet called radiofreeamsterdam.org. I put up 2 hours of music every day.
Hey, John, give us an idea of, I said that some of the people playing on a given night it just wouldn't even sound real. Can you give us just maybe a spread of one, say like when Miles Davis appeared? Who else was on the bill? Do you remember? I could go grab.
Miles Davis, he would never close a show. He had to open. If you were on a multi-act bill with Miles Davis, he went first. And then he got paid. And then he relaxed. He was a genius, that guy, in many ways. And that was one of them. I learned that by booking him several times, that he wanted to go first.
Hmm, hmm.
So I don't know. I'd have to visualize the post. You can go and see the posters.
I was going to go grab the poster.
They're online somewhere anyway.
But tell us some about your interaction. Tell us about some of your interaction with Dave Marsh and how that.
Oh, Dave Marsh.
Yeah.
Dave was about 16 when I met him. He was a clerk in a record shop run by a guy called Barry Kramer that was on Cass Avenue, right next to the Decanter Bar. Peter, you might remember the Decanter Bar because when our friend Kenneth B. Cockrell was running for state representative, he used to hang out at the Decanter Bar, and one night he was having a drink and his pistol fell out. That is his fucking campaign right there. I'll never forget that.
And it went off.
I don't think it went off.
Yeah, no, it went across the street.
And it didn't went off? You were there?
I know the story, and grazed the arm of a baby who a guy was holding.
Oh shit!
I mean, it was superficial, but this guy who's not, obviously a grown up now, talks about Kenny Cockrell shot me.
Kenny Cockrell, the baddest single individual ever to come out of the city of Detroit.
And who was your defense attorney?
He was more than he was a genius.
Yeah.
He was like a mentor of Malcolm X. That's how bad he was.
He was no joke.
Same set of ideas, and he could put his ideas across like nobody you ever met in your life.
Mm-hmm.
He was the greatest.
Yes, he was.
I love that guy. And then later his son became mayor of Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he didn't really meet any expectations, but that's what happened.
Well.
So Marsh, I met him. He was working for Barry Kramer. And then they had another guy working there named Tony Ray, R-E-A-Y. And he had the idea for this magazine, Cream. And he convinced Barry Kramer to sponsor the magazine and pay for it, publish it. And I don't know, I never knew that guy very well, but something happened to him, and then Dave Marsh took over the editorship of Cream. I wrote for him a little bit in those days, and then I went to prison. I wrote a big piece from prison that they published. And I thought Dave Marsh was a very promising guy, and he was adopting our point of view of the music business as being a cog in the American entertainment oppressive machinery, and that it had to be fought. And we fought this for a while, and then things like Cream Magazine and Rolling Stone that started out as being exemplars of opposition turned into the ass lickers of the music industry, and soon they controlled everything, and then they developed their beautiful Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. These same people. They're the ones that won't let the MC5 in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or Mitch Ryder. To have an American music Rock and Roll Hall of Fame without having Mitch Ryder is like walking down the street without a head. Mitch Ryder invented this shit. I was there. I heard it. Came over the radio, like Wayne said. I didn't have no idea where Mitch Ryder was, except he made the greatest records of all time at that time. Sock It To Me, Baby. Jenny, Take a Ride. I mean, yeah, on and on. He was so fucking great. They won't let him in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
They were the best band.
I love Dave Marsh because he started out on one side, but now he's part of this huge industry that basically is the main form of oppression of American youth, called popular music.
Yeah.
That's my outlook.
What'd you start to say, Wayne?
I was just going to comment on Mitch Ryder. before he started recording under the name Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, his band, him and his band, it was called Billy Lee and the Rivieras.
Yes.
They were the best rock band in Detroit. I mean, I mentioned all those clubs and they all had bands in them, but the aesthetic ran towards Las Vegas. Like if you could do like a Vegas style show with comedy and, you know, the band members clowning and then, you know, play all the tunes. So these are bands like Jamie Coe and the Gigolos and, you know, but Billy Lee and the Rivieras were a rock band, two guitars, bass and drums, and they just got up and played this
James McCarty, John Bedanjic, two of the
yeah,
greatest players of all time.
greatest players. Yeah, still. I mean, I just worked with
The
Bedanjic
world.
on the Alice Cooper record. He's playing his ass off.
He's the greatest that's alive today, John Bedanjic.
Yeah, yeah.
Johnny B. Johnny B. Johnny
Johnny
B.
B.
Mhm.
But that was a great band. Just, you know, before they ever started recording. I mean, I used to go see them, and you know, it was a music lesson for me. Every time I went, I'd sit right in the front and try to steal as much as I could from the guitar player.
I remember Ryder telling me how he broke his kneecaps by doing the knee drops.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
he
they played
said,
James
after
Brown
I
material.
broke my kneecaps, that I found out that James Brown used knee pads.
The man was smart. Wayne, here's a
He didn't
question.
care about the pain. He wanted to put it over.
Here's
He
a
was rock
question.
and roll, man.
A question from Carlton Goals. Carlton was a founder of the Detroit Music Conservancy. And one of the things they're trying to do is to have the Bluebird Inn on Tireman in Detroit preserved as a national
I read about that.
monument, I guess. or
Historical place.
historical place. Thank you. But he asked, can you, Wayne, briefly discuss recording the first MC5 singles at the United Sound Systems in Detroit? And I'm not sure what is behind that, but is there a story worth expanding?
Well, yeah, John and I can both talk about it because I produced the session. And
We've never done anything like this, first off. We had no idea what we were doing.
we came in.
First
And,
off.
yeah, we all dressed up for the session. you know.
Right.
Fred Smith put on a tie, you know, and then we set up like a band, and the engineer was telling us, well, we're going to cut the track and then we'll overdub the vocal. And Tyner said, no, that I couldn't do that, you know. So they set him up with a mic down in the room, and they had these big voice of the theater monitors.
Too loud.
Yeah. And, you know, we had to crank the gear to get it to sound the way we wanted it to sound. And fortunately, you know, John's diplomacy worked with the engineer to convince him to let us do it this way. Because
I was a lot bigger than him, too.
and after a while, he started to hear it. And I remember him saying, yeah.
We're talking about the great Detroit engineer named Danny Dallas, who cut many of the records that you know as all-time classics.
Yeah, he was
He was
terrific.
our engineer. This was a top-flight recording studio, and we had no idea what to do. Except we knew what we wanted was for the sound of the MC5 as we knew it to come across through the grooves to the listener. And we were determined to make this happen, or else fuck it. And we had this record session that was paid for by Russ Gibb. He gave us $500 to underwrite the cost of the session and pressing 545. I'll never
Wow.
forget that.
No, isn't there something going on where they're actually talking about
We got G Pound.
tearing down Detroit Sound? I'm sorry, United Sound?
Well, I have been active with the Detroit Sound Conservancy since it's.
You have?
I have, yes. And it's great organization. And one of the things, the projects that has been involved in which it's been involved is trying to save United Sound Studios.
I understand this.
Because it has been threatened by the development or, well, the
University.
development of the front of the freeway. They're widening I-94 during that through that area, and the widening of 94 is going to cause the compromising the structures that are there, of which, you know, United Sound is one of them. And apparently, the Department of Transportation has purchased United Sound after some years of protest about this. However, it is not clear that if they have it in their possession and they move it, which is what they're saying they will do, is to move the building. Will it survive if in fact they really want it to survive? And can the building be resurrected as a historic place? Because United Sound is as historic in many ways as Motown, as Hitsville, just because of the sheer amount of
All
music.
records were recorded there starting in the mid-40s.
Yes, absolutely. My dad took John Lee Hooker there to record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mention the other people.
That's
who
where
have
he hit the
recorded.
board with his foot to make the percussion sound. Sound. Did that.
Yeah.
Marsha, can you mention some of the other people who have recorded at United Sound?
Oh God, Marvin Gaye,
Well, George Clinton.
Funkadelics, George Clinton, just
all the Funkadelic.
All Don Davis's productions. Don owned it for a while, and everything he produced, he cut
Who's
there.
that?
Don Davis.
Oh yeah, Don Davis was based there. I thought he bought it.
Yeah, he did.
yes, yeah, at one point, yes. And
Don Davis, my banker.
that's all right. That's
What
good.
else Don Davis did was form the black-owned bank.
That's right. That's
First
right.
Independence
First
Bank.
Independence Bank. That's right.
I'm an account holder.
Yeah.
I knew Don Davis. I remember the day that Don Davis told me he played guitar with my friend Lyman Woodard. Lyman was his organ player. And one day he said, you know, I'm going to start producing records. I said, producing records? What about the guitar? He said, well, there's only one West Montgomery, and I'm not going to be it. So, so I think if I want to get anywhere in the business of this music, I better produce some records. And he went down to Stax, and he started producing the Dramatics.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he made the first platinum 45 of all time, Disco Lady by Johnny Taylor.
My goodness. John Sinclair knows so much stuff.
Well, I knew Don Davis. He's a friend of mine.
He does.
He just knows stuff. He just knows arcade stuff. You know, just stuff.
I've been here, girl. I'm paying attention. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. I hear you.
You know, there's
my granddaughter, I said, all you got to do is pay attention, and then all the stuff will become apparent to you.
There's an organization called the National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame Foundation, and Janice Hazel asked a question, which you can still do. We'll have some time left with our three guests. And they're talking about making Inkster High School into a National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame museum. Anybody know anything about this?
No, Inkster High, good choice.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. Why is Inkster High a good choice?
Inkster.
It's empty.
The pure D black experience of Detroit, Inkster.
I did not associate
people put him in a little joint out in the country, you know.
yeah, I hear you. No, I did not know about that initiative. It's very interesting.
I didn't either. I'm surprised you didn't know. I figured you'd be at the forefront.
Right, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know about that. Yeah. I'm familiar with some of the things Detroit Sound Conservancy is doing. And I did, I believe, meet the head of that project, though, at one point. But I had not heard about the efforts to center it in Inkster.
That's a good project. I like
What's
it.
I think it's really necessary here in Detroit if we talk about the future of music. One of the weaknesses,
They ought to have something. They look on music
they ought to have some other
faster Epcot.
recognition, yeah, of musical spaces other than Motown, you know. Uh, Motown is expanding, is
I'll
going.
tell you what, Motown hasn't gotten anywhere that Motown didn't pay for themselves.
Yeah, I hear you.
City of Detroit hasn't done shit to recognize Motown.
I hear you.
Known
And
all over the world. This city is the stupidest fucking place as far as its own attractions are concerned.
well, you know,
There's a place that had 283 marijuana dispensaries pop up in the neighborhoods, and they closed them all down. What kind of maniacs are running this place?
well, John, let me say this though. You know, there is an organization called, or a gathering of folks called Detroit A Go Go. And they're people basically out of England and Europe who are into Northern Soul, Northern Soul music, all of this music that is really, its kernel is in Detroit. And some of these arcane titles and all of this, and they're really into this Detroit music. I was there. Wait a minute, John. John, wait. I was there when they started disembarking from their buses. They've been coming here every year to Detroit, and they stay at the St. Regis. And it's dozens of people from England and Germany and all these places. And they came to Detroit. They got off the bus. The ones that went to visit Motown got down on the ground and kissed the ground. Kiss the ground.
Response.
Oh my God. It's just thrilling to see that kind of love and recognition of Detroit and this music that has filled the world.
You won't get that in Livonia.
You might not get it in downtown Detroit.
No, not either.
Yeah. It's amazing. The role of Detroit music all over the world.
Huge.
There needs to be more recognition, formal recognition of this musical legacy of Detroit.
Well, that kind of stuff starts with the city council.
Well, it's probably there in whatever entities that can make that take place. But I think that it's something that's sorely lacking, because when people come here, that's one of the first things they want to know, where can we go hear music? You know, where can we hear music? I'm hopeful that they're doing some redevelopment in the North End. And you know, the North End now, you guys are going to know some of this. Now, in the North End, you had a place called the Apex Bar.
Apex.
The Apex Bar, and you also had Phelps Lounge. Yeah. And it is possible that some of the redevelopment efforts in the North End might lend itself to some kind of musical spaces.
Right.
Because there needs to be spaces that honor the legacy.
You know, folks, let me interrupt you. We got about 15 minutes left.
Oh,
we could reorient back to the man who we're celebrating, Dave Marsh.
Dave's doing okay without us.
We're having a good time. He'd appreciate it.
This conversation should continue. But
he's got
Wayne,
more money than all of us put together.
Yeah. Wayne, as a rock and roller, as a working musician, how important are rock critics like Dave Marsh?
I think guys like Dave, I mean, you know, there's a whole kind of cadre of people that write about rock music that, you know,
don't know a good record when they hear it.
Yeah, they write blowjobs. I mean, you know, the record companies pay them in various ways, and so it's not really criticism. I mean, this is a age-old question of, you know, art criticism, literary criticism, music criticism, and to me, a guy like Dave is valuable because he is knowledgeable.
He knows what a good record is.
Yeah, and he knows what he's talking about. He knows the historical reference points.
Mhm.
He knows the dynamics of what the musicians go through in trying to create art. And if you're knowledgeable and you find something worth um, talking about in print, um, that can be helpful. That I find that helpful for me. Um, if you're just dogging people to make your bones and develop a reputation, that's not so useful to
Like
me.
a Lester Young, for example.
Mm.
Lester Bangs.
Lester Bangs, yeah. Not to be confused with Lester Young.
Not
Uh,
in any
um,
way.
but Lester Bangs came around. I mean, that's where Dave's influence at Cream. He really was the intellectual core, and he was, I think, like a sounding board for Lester to kind of, because Lester was all over the maps often. Um,
Lester was just trying to get famous.
Yeah, but Dave had a commitment to his work, and has a commitment to his work that's serious. And so if people are taking the art seriously and writing about it seriously, then that's useful. That's helpful. That's helpful to the artist, and it's helpful to the fan to gain some insight to see, how does this work? How did this come to be? What are the ideas in play here? What is this artist talking about? Uh, uh, you know, Knowledgeable criticism is valuable. I mean, we in political circles, the critical thinking is necessary. A critical analysis of what the world around us is fundamental, and you can't move forward without it. So to apply that to art and art criticism, as Dave has done over his whole career, I mean, he's always had a larger vision about how rock fits into the American experience.
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
having how much to say. Imagine the four of us have all written books, right? But Dave has written how many books? I that photo, that logo with Dave on his book, that's all his.
You're going to do your book on Bruce Springsteen.
Me? I
See,
can't even think
but
of
this
a
is, you
theme
bring
for a
up a
second
good
one.
point, John. John brings up a good point because when Marsh wrote the Springsteen book, it was somebody taking Springsteen seriously,
Right.
which, in my opinion, cemented his status as you know a bona fide voice for
Well,
working people and the disenfranchised. An aspirational.
let's say it right out. They conspired with the management to put his record in the top 10. The same way they conspired to keep ours out. Same people.
Bruce did pretty good. He didn't die, and he didn't succumb to addiction and alcoholism and crime, and never got himself into that much trouble. I mean, I was kind of proud of him for getting arrested for drinking a shot of tequila before he rode his motorcycle.
Your
But
master
human.
amount of money. He has so much money that he hires Dave Marsh's wife to tell him how to spend it.
I don't know. People that have that much money, it's hard for me to relate to them. I
He did.
live in a different universe.
But
But
Well,
I'm just saying,
Wikipedia says that Dave Marsh has written 27 books.
oh my God.
That's a lot of books.
Wow.
it's a
That's,
lot of hours at the typewriter.
I mean, just think, you write a book about one song, Louie Louie.
Right.
That's just incredible. An entire book about one song.
One paragraph issue, though.
But it's still amazing. It's still amazing. Yeah.
He's prolific.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brings new meaning to the word prolific.
Yeah, yeah, that's that discipline, the discipline of writing. Because the one thing that I learned about him, because I fancied myself as a music critic, that's where I kind of got into the game, writing about music. But even being around him, I realized that's not what I am. I'm not a music critic. I like to write about music, and I may have elements of criticism in my writing, music criticism in my writing, but that is not my milieu. He's got that one. He does that. Hmm. Yeah, it's
Dave
cool.
Curley is listening in Jersey. He says he loves Dave's book on Bruce, but he also said, why wasn't the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Detroit, as opposed to what we call the mistake on the lake?
Rolling
Right?
Stone did that.
The what?
Rolling Stone had its readers pick the location, and the radio station in Cleveland loaded the.
I was going to say.
Turned out all the people to vote. You don't remember that?
No.
That's why it's so phony. Rolling Stone voters, readers, the most idiotic motherfuckers that there are, decided that it should be in Cleveland. Why Cleveland? Because they told them it should be in Cleveland. Didn't have any reason for it.
No. And one of the things that Dave talks a lot about is where.
It was in Detroit, they'd have to let Mitch Ryder and the MC5 in.
Well, I don't know. Any thought? Let me ask Wayne. Any thoughts why Mitch and you guys aren't in the?
Well, my theory doesn't really play across me and Mitch, or the MC5 and Mitch, because Mitch had hit records. But see, the MC5 was never a hit band.
That's right.
We were almost a hit band. We were on the brink of being a hit, but then they banned us for saying motherfucker on our album. That's hard for people to understand today.
And then fired us from the record label.
Yeah, you could be banned on the radio for saying that word, when in a lot of music today, you can't get played unless you say that word. So
Right.
so well,
But I understand that Dave Marsh really fought for the MC5.
yeah.
And Mitch Ryder too, to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I remember discussions about that years ago. But he
still having them.
carried that is on his own, but they still have it.
But see, so that's the thing though with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. How do you quantify membership? If it's sports, it's this many home runs, or this many baskets, or this many goals.
Tom Petty is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
How do you quantify art? Do you do it on record sales? Do you do it on the influence of the artist? I mean, it's this kind of nebulous formula that doesn't seem to be understandable by people like me, about how you decide who gets that designation. And so if it has to do with popularity, the MC5 is not that popular. I mean, you can ask the average kid today on the street, and they've never heard of the MC5. I mean, it's only serious music fans that follow the.
Never heard of James Brown either, though.
Well,
never heard of Miles Davis.
That's to that extreme.
Well, Barb
never heard of good
says that Cleveland gave the biggest tax breaks for the museum, which is probably part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
that was down the line. Rolling Stone readers elected Cleveland.
Okay.
And that where Alan Freed was from?
Yeah. Well, Dave Curley writes case
came to rock and roll.
Alan Freed.
He was from New York. He went to Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then he went back to New York.
But Janice Hazel says the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame considered Detroit for its headquarters at the site of for the Motown Studios on Woodward. But at the time, Berry Gordy would not sell the building and the site, and the city of Detroit would not provide tax incentives.
Mhm.
Oh,
Another brilliant move by the Detroit government.
But I'm sure that that was not
they
the
deserve
only
a Hall of Fame
available,
all their
no,
own.
that was not the only available building in Detroit. Now, come on now.
Yeah.
You know,
You got plenty of buildings.
plenty of buildings it could have been in.
Lots of buildings.
Yep, 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 yep. But, you know, I think that
It's been a
there's
long
still much
time
to be
since Dave
done.
Marsh has been in Detroit.
I mean,
Or Pontiac.
I have a theory that Jan Wenner
Whoa,
hates the MC5.
he does.
Yeah, I just, you know, I met him one time at the Fillmore. We went there to debut our album, and he was at the sound check, and so I went up and said hello to him, and he said, "When you're doing that stuff on the guitar, that feedback, do you know what you're doing?" And I said, "Of course I know what I'm doing. It's my guitar. I'm doing this on purpose. This is a controlled thing. I'm trying to do something here." And he didn't, I don't think he believed me. And then he turned around and, you know, loved the Who and Jimi Hendrix. So, you know, maybe our militant stance put him off. I mean, he was of the
They hated us because of our politics.
yeah, he was, you know, a
Away
peace
from your
lover
attention
and you know,
and
supporting the
creative
hippies and all that stuff. And
We've got about 2 minutes. Why don't we try to just go through the three of you, maybe give some closing remarks about Dave, about the intro.
Sure.
Greatness of Dave.
Right. Marcia?
Well, I just say that Dave is a seminal writer. He's a seminal American writer, and he is not often touted as for the significance that he has as
Mhm.
a writer, period.
Mhm.
Not just in the genres of music, but as a writer. And you know, I hope that over time he becomes more recognized for the contribution he has made to American letters and this culture.
Thank
Here,
you.
here.
Wayne, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I second that emotion. You know, I trust that history will recognize his contribution. I mean, he has been a great friend over the years, and also provided me with, you know, thought-provoking ideas that have been a gift. Have a great deal of gratitude for Dave and everything he's accomplished, and look forward to growing older together.
John, any final thoughts?
I don't know. I don't have so many thoughts. I like Dave Marsh. We were estranged for many years because of things that they were writing about me and Cream when I got out of prison. And so I didn't speak to Dave Marsh for about 20 or 25 years. And then I was on a panel with him in Austin, Texas at South by Southwest about the MC5 when the movie was going to come out the first time. And 2003, something like that. Anyway, we were on this thing and we couldn't remember why we were so pissed off with each other. So we decided to be friends again. So we've been friends ever since. I go on his radio show when I'm in New York, and we keep in touch. I like him.
Thank you, John. Marcia Music, Wayne Kramer, John Sinclair. Absolutely terrific.
Peter Burby.
Oh, thank you, Marcia. And let's, I have to toss it to Eric. I have no idea how to do it, but here
did it.
It's
been done.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was just about the most Detroitish panel on Detroit we possibly could have had.
Right.
You got the right people.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. And we will be back with the next event in Land of Hope and Dreams on Thursday evening with a discussion with Denny Alexander, Little Steven, and Jackson Brown. So until then, so long, y'all.
All right.